Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to my review of the first episode for Marvel What If. I think I've said this about a billion times now, but I'll say it 1,000,000,001. I've been looking forward to seeing this series, I think more than any other Marvel series, especially after seeing the first preview of like what was in store for this year. And so far, it has not disappointed. I've been really happy with what I've seen, and I've heard that episode 2 is even crazier, and it just gets better and better as it goes. So yeah, this is definitely gonna be one for the books. At least I'm hoping so. So I do have to say that this is going to be rather quick since I am low on time. And I'll also be talking about some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode already, please go watch it. It is so good. And then come back here so we can join in some discussion. So this first episode starts off near the beginning of the first Captain America movie, just before Steve is getting the super soldier serum, where the doctor asked Peggy, like, don't you want to go up to the booth to watch this? And she says, like, no, I'll stay on the lab floor. And it was because of that decision that everything spiraled in a completely different direction. So when she decides that she's going to stay on the lab floor, like all the other like high-ranking officers and scientists and like that whole entourage, they stayed on the floor as well because they're like, well, she stays, I'll stay, I guess. So, because of that, there was a German spy among that group that was able to open a lighter, and I'm not sure how this played out, but he threw it and it caused an explosion, sending Steve flying out of the machine, and he ends up shooting Steve, so he's not in the best shape. So, Colonel Flynn, which I had to look this up to correctly identify this evil man. He is like shouting at people like, "Oh my God, but we're, like this experiment is going wrong. Like we don't have the resources to do this again. If we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this now. We need somebody to go now." So he looks at Howard Stark, Tony's dad, who like helped put this experiment together. He's like, "Nah, I'm just the dude that presses the buttons. I'm not going in there." And so Peggy, looking at Steve, she's like, "Okay, I need to do something." So she steps up and she's like, "All right, get the machine fired up. I'm going in." So of course, Colonel Flynn is like, "Huh?" But Peggy gets in there and she gets injected with the super soldier serum. Now, what's interesting, which I didn't realize till my second watch through, is that when Peggy gets into the machine, you don't see all the flashing lights and stuff, which is probably due to the some time restraints of the episode because they have a lot of material to go through. Well, it could be that. It could have just played out different. And she also doesn't scream like Steve does. So I'm like, "Hey, let's go, Peggy. Take it like a woman." But I think like the I don't know if interesting is the right word for it, but when the process is over and they're like, okay, like she has all the super soldier serum in her, and Howard Stark goes to check, like you see her in that pod by herself, but it's only until Howard Stark stands next to her that you're like, oh, she did change. She's buff now, which was pretty funny. So she comes out, sees that everything's changed, and then Colonel Flynn's like, "Oh my God, millions of dollars were wasted on a woman." And so I was like, "Oh no, Jungle Cruise flashbacks again. Not this. Don't call her pants." But yeah, after that, it goes to the next scene where Peggy is hitting a punching bag, punches the bag off of the little hanger that it's on, hits a wall like way across the room, and then she ends up throwing a weight, kind of like I guess practicing for throwing the shield. She like throws a weight and it gets stuck in the wall, and apparently she's done that multiple times. So she's talking with Steve, who is recovering, and he's like telling her like, well, now you're the one who gets to save the world. She's like, "Oh, but it should have been you." And I don't think they talk about Bucky quite yet. Or no. I think they do. I think they briefly mention Bucky, or Steve mentions Bucky and says like, "Oh, the 107th is going out on a mission or whatever." She's like, "Well, we always have somebody else like trying to save us. I wish that we could try and save them." I also have in my notes here that it's funny that like that it doesn't happen very often throughout the episode, but there are little nods to the main timeline, which are pretty funny. Like when Peggy and Steve are talking, after she had like punched the punching bag through the wall, and he's like, well, hey, at least you probably won't have to go on a really long press tour. And you always have to smile and wear a weird costume. Like, oh, that's funny. That's a funny little hint to the main timeline, what Steve had to go through after initially becoming Captain America. But one of the things I also really found interesting was the fact that they still fell in love, but it was like a very unique love story. Like, it didn't feel like we were just watching the same events play out that had played out previously. Like, the way that they were able to like form their bond, it almost seemed like after she got the super soldier serum, she became bold or a little bit more brave in multiple ways, such as her combat, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So the next thing that I have written down in my notes here is how good the visuals are, and I'm really thankful that they went with a 3D animation style for this one, because it will save them a lot of time with having to redraw the characters. Like, all they have to do is manipulate the models, and it gives us more of an opportunity to get a like Marvel cinematic feel with all like the really cool special effects and great cinematography without having to like really stress out some artists on drawing different angles. I don't even know a fraction of what's that like, but I've tried to animate a little bit, and so I understand just how difficult that can be, especially on like such short timetables if they've been putting these shows on. So yeah, that's a really great decision on their part. But the next scene that we get to is where Peggy is sitting with Colonel Flynn and Howard Stark, and they're talking about the Tesseract, and Howard Stark's telling them how important it is that we need to the US needs to get the Tesseract back, because, or at least attain the Tesseract in the first place, because it's a really powerful battery, is the way that Howard kind of explained it to Colonel Flynn, and it can be used to create or it can be used to advance technology. And well, y'all know the story of the Tesseract. He was basically explaining how important it was. Colonel Flynn's like, you want me to send a platoon of dudes out there to get a battery, a really good battery? Like, no, I'm not doing that. So, of course, Peggy's upset, Howard's upset, because they both know how important the Tesseract could be, or the possibilities that it could have. So Peggy goes out to drink, and she's upset. She's like, and Howard ends up walking up to her while she's drinking at this bar, as like, well, you know, we can still go through with this. I got something for you. So he slides a suit over to her, or a box that has a suit inside of it, and it's basically Captain America's uniform. I want to say it's pretty close to his first uniform that he gets in the first Captain America. Not like the wool or cloth or whatever that one was, but the better one, the nicer one that he ends up wearing in Endgame, I think. I'm pretty sure. Except this one has the Union Jack on it. And I think I'm just going to talk about this now before I forget. I think it's kind of weird that, one, he put the Union Jack on this uniform when she's supposed to be representing the United States. Like, yeah, she's from Britain, but, you know, she's working with the United States now since she's working with the U.S. military, so I don't know why he would put Union Jack on it. That's one. Second thing is, even after putting the Union Jack on it, she doesn't become, like, Captain Britain. And she definitely can't become Captain America wearing a Union Jack. Instead, she's just referred to as Captain Carter in the show. And that's pretty weird. I don't really get why they made that decision. And I don't know, it just makes you ponder. But it didn't really take away from the episode. It just gave you another, I guess, thing to think about. But after Peggy is all suited up, she ends up going to, I believe it's, I don't think it's Berlin, but it's in the general area. She's in Germany. I know that. She's in Germany. So she ends up going to Germany to stop this fleet of cars that are trying to get the Tesseract to Berlin. And that first scene where she drops down and she has the shield with the Union Jack on it as well. And she hits a car, stops it, it flips over. And then the next car, she like rams into it and lifts it up and throws it up behind her. And she's like, "Oh, that's excellent. Like that's bloody brilliant. Let's do. I want to do it again." And I thought it was kind of funny that Joanne from the GVM podcast mentioned how like what's the right word? I guess brutal Peggy is compared to Steve, especially in like the first Captain America movie where he didn't really want to kill anybody. So to see Peggy just go straight for it, that is an interesting decision. And something that I said in response to him is like, well, maybe if Peggy had tried to go down that route of, well, I don't really want to kill anybody, everybody deserves a second chance, they would have been like, oh, look at the woman being all soft. This is why she shouldn't have got the serum in the first place, or something like that. And Colonel Flynn actually makes a comment similar to that later in the episode. So I guess, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Just go in there and mess some people up, I guess. Oh my gosh, this next scene where she is like beating these dudes up in front of the cars on the street, and then one big German dude walks in like he's the baddest, like he's that guy, and Peggy just like kicks his knee and it collapses. He's like, ah, and then she kicks him in the groin. He's like, oh. That was funny. But the scene that happens before that fight scene, that's like a taste of like just some really good fighting choreography in this episode. And I really loved it because it identified Peggy's fighting style different and made it different from Steve's, where he was kind of more of a boxer, and he would tend to do hand-to-hand combat as well as throwing the shield. Even when Peggy threw the shield, she threw it differently than Steve did. So that only added to like the uniqueness of her fighting style, and she ended up doing a lot of kicks and acrobatics, which just looked super cool. It just looked really great. And I kind of wrote this down in my notes, which is pretty funny. I'm like, Peggy's kind of like the Deku to Steve's All Might, because if anybody watches My Hero Academia, when Deku is kind of learning All Might's skills, and he's trying to at first copy his fighting style, which Peggy doesn't do. But then when Deku develops his own fighting style, he tends to go with more kicks, whereas All Might was more of a like fist fighting kind of dude. So I thought that was pretty funny. So of course, because Peggy wrecked all those dudes, her mission was successful and she was able to retrieve the Tesseract. And because she was able to retrieve the Tesseract, an very interesting development happens. She gives it to Stark, and Stark approaches Steve like, hey, do you still want to support the war effort? Because I think I have an idea for you. And he creates something called the Hydra Stomper, which is basically like the I think it's pretty close in size to the Iron Hulk. Is that what it's called? Like the really big Iron Man suit that's used to handle the Hulk. But this suit is called the Hydra Stomper. So I like this. This is going to be the worst part of these episodes, is just wondering how the MCU would have played out with these changes in mind. Because that is just like, how would Tony have created the Iron Man suit? Would he even have created the Iron Man suit? Would have been more advanced? Like what could have played what could have changed there, especially because Tony's dad he was famous for making like nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction and things like that. So would he have been making Iron Man suits instead? Would everybody have had one? Like, just the questions are endless, and that's something I love, not just about the MCU in general, but especially about this series, which is why I was looking forward to it. So after Steve is able to get into the Hydra Stomper after it's been made, him and Peggy go on missions together, and it's almost like they're going on date night. Like, oh, baby, you want to go beat up some bad guys? Like, oh my God, that's my favorite. Let's do it. Like, it is so cute. And just seeing like in the live action Captain America, I don't think they were ever as like, or I don't think they were ever as ooey gooey as they feel in this show. But because we've seen their love develop through the MCU, I almost think it's better that they act a little bit more familiar, because that we know that like this is what Steve wanted or envisioned for his life, was to be like this with Peggy. So it was really cool to see this. But oh my gosh, this next fighting scene after the Hydra Stomper's introduced, it is one of my favorite fighting sequences that I've seen from the MCU and from animation and quite a bit. It is just so impressive, so dynamic, so entertaining. Oh man, I loved it. I loved it. But there is a scene where Peggy hops onto the back of the Hydra Stomper. They go up into the air, and there are a few German military planes, like really big, I think cargo planes, that Peggy like jumps through the windshield, fights the pilot, fights a few people inside the plane. I think she opens the hatch, jumps out of the plane, is like skydiving onto the next plane, rinse and repeat, and then jumps onto the Hydra Stomper. It was just like one of the coolest sequences. And if you don't want to watch this show or this episode for some reason, at least watch that sequence. It's really impressive and really awesome. So in the next scene, I believe this is the scene where Colonel Flynn is saying that Platoon 107 was captured, which is Bucky's platoon. So of course Steve wants to do something about it. So when Peggy's there and having that meeting, she says like, I could go in there and get him. Just give me a group of guys. And of course, why do I keep saying of course? Of course, Colonel Flynn's like, no, like you're just lucky to be in the room, which I think he says earlier in the episode, which I didn't mention, which again is like or maybe I did with the pants thing, but it's just the female struggle aspect, and Peggy expands on that later while her and Steve are drinking at a bar, and she's drinking whiskey, talking about how it doesn't affect her, similar to how Steve did that in the first Captain America, talking about how alcohol didn't affect him, and talking about how she just wanted to be respected and treated as an equal, which is kind of interesting that I think everything that's come out this year from Marvel has had some sort of social message. So I'm wondering if each episode of What If will have some kind of social message, or I don't know, because like some of these things can get pretty abstract, especially going into Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Strange and other franchises. But I also think it's probably because our society is much more sensitive to social topics and social issues now. Especially with like all the stuff that we've had going on within the past like 2 or 3 years, that maybe these things just stick out to me more, but I definitely feel like Marvel's been putting some more of these issues and like a little bits of discussion or topics for discussion into their material. So after Peggy talks about the plight of being a woman, she is able to go on, I think, a covert mission to go get the platoon. So what's also really cool is when she's doing this and she's invading the base, which I think is the same mission that Steve went on to go rescue Bucky. She does like almost the exact same intro as Steve, where she's running next to a guy on a motorcycle. She's like, oh, that looks fun. Let me try, and like hits him off of it and then gets onto it. So she invades the base. And the platoon sees her and they're like, oh man, like when did Dames learn how to fight like that? And some like little scragglers come in, so she beats them out. She's like, or well, imagine these are my legs, but and does that. He's like, oh okay, since now I see. And so she pulls the door off of this like cage that they're in, which is kind of weird that they were in like a really small cage like that instead of like a jail cell or something, but they're in a cage. She's like, is Bucky Barnes in here? He's like, yeah, who are you? And she's like, I'm friends with Steve. So they're able to connect like that, and we skip a little bit in time, so we assume that like they're a little bit more familiar, where Peggy is going on a mission with Steve, who they kind of refer to as the Hydra Stomper, kind of, sort of. So Steve and Bucky and the rest of the 107 platoon to go jump onto the train that was in that winter scene where Bucky eventually falls off of it, and because of that becomes the Winter Soldier in the first movie. So in this show, they jump onto the train and Bucky almost falls off like right at the beginning of the ride, but Peggy's able to like pull him up by his arm. He's like, dang, you almost take my arm off. Kind of like a reference to what happens in an alternate universe. So Steve flies over to the front of the train, is like, not really, I'm not really sure what he was doing. Like, he wasn't stopping it. He was just kind of like skating down the rails with it, I guess. So he looks into the driver's seat, and through that window, he's able to see that there are a bunch of bombs at the front of the train. So he's like, "Oh, Peggy, like, get out of here." So the explosion goes off, and we don't know what happens to Steve. And it's at this point I'm like, oh, would Steve become the Winter Soldier because he got into an accident, fell down to the bottom, and then Hydra could find him? I'm like, that would be pretty sick. That's not the direction they go. Unfortunately, the episode's still really cool, but that just, I couldn't imagine, because they would have to do a lot of work to get Steve to be the Winter Soldier, because him amplified to be Captain America, like, the serum amplifies who you are. So if you're a good dude, you become a really good dude. If you're a bad dude, you become a really bad dude. So what would they have to do to Steve to get him to that point? That's an interesting question that I thought about. So when Peggy goes to talk to Colonel Flynn about what happened with the train accident and stuff, he's like, "I knew you should have never become the super soldier, or you never should have taken that serum in the first place. You never should have been a field agent," like all this crap, basically like putting her down, which just adds insult to injury after presuming to have lost the love of her life. But later on in the episode, Peggy approaches the colonel again and says, "Listen, we need to do one last mission, and we can go into Hydra's base and stop who is now being referred to as Red Skull, which is the leader of, I think, maybe the weapons division, or maybe just the general leader of Hydra. And then the Fuhrer, who we know who that is somebody else entirely. I'm not exactly sure where the scaling is, but he's high up there. We know that he's dealing with the weapons at least. She wants to go stop him, which can, as they said multiple times in the episode, it could stop the war, it could end the war, we could win. Which is kind of funny that they keep saying that, because it's almost like hypnotism. Like, if you do this, this will happen. Oh, this didn't work out this time, but next time. Oh, it didn't work out this time, but next time. And I think like it was really starting to get on. Interestingly enough, I think Bucky points it out by saying, like, yeah, I've heard it before. The war is going to be ended if we do this. Just because of Bucky's history with hypnotism and having somebody tell him directions, like, oh, doing this action is going to lead to this result. So it's interesting he pointed that out. But they do end up going on this mission. She ends up bringing the whole 107 platoon with Bucky included, and she even brings Howard Stark, which is an interesting change for him, and which he even states himself in the episode, like, I'm the dude that presses the buttons. I'm not a big, like, I'm not this kind of guy. She's like, oh, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. So they bust into the scene, blowing the doors open, guns blazing, just, if you see someone, take them out. And they eventually get to the back of the base, where there's an option to go up to like a higher tower and the option to go down, which is presumably where like all the secret stuff and the lab that Red Skull's like doing his experiments, that's probably where it is. So Peggy goes up, Bucky and his team go down, and Peggy brings Howard Stark with her. So when Bucky goes down into this like secret lair, they see the Hydra Stomper kind of like hanging up. Funny enough, and like it kind of looked like the thing that the Incredibles were stuck in after like the first movie, where they're just like stuck in place, but not nearly as advanced as that. But it's just hanging out there, and Steve is just been like thrown to the side off near the corner of the room, which is so weird that he wasn't like locked up or anything. I almost think that maybe they didn't know Steve was inside, so they retrieved the armor, and then Steve like woke up, climbed out, and probably hurt himself doing so, because it's like really far drop. So Bucky walks up to Steve, and he's like, "Steve, are you alright?" And Steve's like, "Oh, we need to stop Red Skull, like he's doing something really terrible." So then we flash up onto the tower where Peggy and Howard are, and they just bust into the room where Red Skull is, and he's like, "Ah, you're too late. Like, I'm already going to summon my creature that's going to make Hydra the most powerful organization in the world." So he activates this portal, and what happens next was just completely, I was not expecting that to happen. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know what this thing is called. I'll have to Google it and put it somewhere in the subtitles. But this, like, all these tentacles just pop out of this portal and are just grabbing people up. And one of the first people that it grabs, funny enough, is Red Skull. Like, he's like, yes, alive, come to life. Oh, no. And then he just gets like squished like a little grape. So that's the end of Red Skull. Don't know if we'll be seeing him on Vormir, but we're definitely not seeing him at the end of this episode. So they're like, oh, this is a problem. So immediately Peggy's like, okay, well, we need to try and figure out how to shut this thing down. So Howard, you go over there, see if you can shut it off. I'm going to keep the thing at bay. So Howard goes over to the machinery and is like, okay, everything is written in German. So Peggy's trying to fight this thing off, and it eventually like grabs her and like pins her up against a wall. And luckily enough, there's like a sword hanging there. She takes it, chops it off, and then just starts going to work on this thing's like tentacles. So while this is happening, we flash back down to Steve and Bucky, who after getting some power into the suit, which was previously powered by the Tesseract, which is how they're able to open that portal. They were able to get some power from some generator in the room, I believe. So he didn't have a lot of time to waste. Gets in the suit. He's like, where's Peggy? And I'm like, oh, she's upstairs. He's like, okay. Just flies through the roof. And I kind of found it a little funny that he didn't think about, like, oh, there's probably going to be some debris that falls down. Hopefully nobody dies. But no, he's just like, I got to save my woman. That's my mission right now. So he flies up to help Peggy. And Peggy sees that he's alive. She's like, Steve. He's like, oh, did you miss me? She's like, every second. I'm like, oh, so cute, so cute. So they're doing their little thing. They're fighting together. And Howard is eventually able to figure out like how to get the machine to suck this creature back into the portal. But it needs a little bit of help. So Peggy makes the ultimate sacrifice and starts pushing this thing back into the portal. And she eventually goes into the portal with it just to make sure that it's all contained and gets back in. And Steve can't really help because he runs out of juice like halfway through the fight. So he's doing what he can just to get people like the 107 platoon like out of the area so that way nobody gets hurt, or at least as few casualties as possible. So Peggy goes in the portal and we don't know what happens to her until the next scene where you see the portal open back up. She runs in with her shield and the sword that she had to fight off the monster. And we see present day, well, somewhat present day, Nick Fury and Hawkeye, interestingly enough. I wouldn't think that Hawkeye would be like the side dude to Nick Fury, but he's the one who's there. And Nick Fury's like, who are you? What are you doing here? And Hawkeye's like, that's Captain Carter. And she's like, where's Steve? Like, who are you guys? Nick Fury's like, well, the war ended over 70 years ago. And she's like, and Nick Fury's also like, are you gonna be okay? And Peggy's like, of course. I mean, we won the war. And clearly she knows. She's thinking about how much of her life that she missed that could have been with Steve, could have been in the time that she grew up in. The same thing that Steve went through in the main MCU timeline. But something that I thought was funny when I was rewatching this with my brother was that Nick Fury didn't say that they won the war. He just said that the war was over. So is it possible that they lost? I'm pretty sure they didn't, because it looked like a lot of things that played out the way that they did in the main timeline. But it's interesting that he didn't say that they won. He just said the war was over. But yeah, that concluded the first episode of Marvel What If. There was no end credit scene, but the credits that played, or at least the first section of credits, they did have some behind the scenes of the different backgrounds, like really beautiful backgrounds that they used. So it's definitely worth a sit down just to see that. But yeah, I really liked this episode. I like entertainment that really makes you either think about something or really feel a specific emotion. Well, not a specific emotion. Makes you feel some type of emotion. So this definitely checked both boxes actually, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the like Star-Lord episode where it's T'Challa who's acting as Star-Lord instead of Peter Quill. And I kind of wonder what happened to Peter Quill. Does he just, I guess he just stays on Earth and grows up as like a normal dude, or somewhat normal, I guess. he's kind of a quirky guy. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I was thinking about this because I'm like, I don't think I rated anything like higher than an 8 out of 10 recently, and my enjoyment for this, at least for this moment, I have to give it a 9. I have to give it a 9. I don't know if 10 is like, it's like that perfect grade that I don't know if I'll ever give it to anything, or I'll really be hard. Maybe for the whole series I would give it a 10 if it keeps up like this, but for now, a 9. It was really good. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see the next episode, especially since it's going to be my breaks from school. It's just going to be a good time. It's going to be really good. But yeah, tell me what you guys thought down in the comments below about this first episode, and what are you looking forward to when thinking about watching this show. I honestly, I haven't looked at what the episodes are going to be focusing on. I know that the next one is going to be focused around Star-Lord, but other than that, I'm trying to stay somewhat like just keep my mind open to the possibilities of what if, I guess. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below what you guys thought about this episode and what you're looking forward to seeing. I definitely want to know what you guys are thinking about. But that is going to be it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. So if you guys did enjoy this, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new, so you can see the rest of my reviews for this series, because I'm definitely going to be breaking this down episode by episode. And I hope you all have a nice evening, morning, or night, wherever enjoy it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace!